Alright, today I'm going to be recording an SOP on printing with dual extrusion, in this case PLA and PVA. PVA is a water-soluble support filament that you can use to support features in your model that may otherwise be overhangs that are too large for the printer to print. So I've already got an STL loaded in here. Just to review, you can also just open it up and have your STL, scale it down just so it takes up less space. And once we have our STL here, there are a whole bunch of different general starter profiles in Cura. We're going to go with 0.15 millimeter layer height engineering profile, and it says there's only a configuration for extruder 1, but that's fine because we'll be essentially doing our own configuration here. So go through, make sure these both look standard. And I've got in basic mode here. You can go to advanced mode and have a little more settings to mess with, but I'll keep in basic mode until we need to go over. And then here's where the PLA and PVA comes in, the dual extrusion. I like to print my parts, my PLA parts, even if they have no support, on a raft of PVA, such that, and so yeah, you go build plate adhesion type, raft, extruder, extruder 2, and as you can see, there's sort of this 3-layer raft under the part that supports the all the places on the part that touch the build plate. This is a little bit of a weird model, so let me actually throw in just a model of a cell we're working on. Give it a second to load. In the meantime, we've also got, okay, here it is. I'll rotate that. Snap that face to the build plate, make sure the text is still readable on the bottom. Here's what the raft ideally looks like. If you give it a second to slice, go to a preview mode, and we see here a raft under the bar essentially. The other thing that you can use PVA for is support. So just under the support, check generate support, extruder 2, and then support placement. You can either do touching the build plate, meaning it'll only support parts touching the build plate, so support will go from the build plate to the model, whereas you can also do everywhere, where your support will can start in the part, and you can have support that starts, for example, at layer 100 and ends at layer 150 rather than having to start at layer 0. Support overhang angle is the value, the angle below which, or above which parts will be supported. So if you just want to support vertical stuff, you can do like an angle of 80, or 90-degree overhangs essentially. You can do an angle of 85, and we see here we've now got support on the 90-degree overhangs, of which they're not many. If we bring that down to like 45 and slice it, I figure it's got to add a lot of support, so it takes a minute to slice, but if we give it a second, now we see basically our entire part is supported. There are a lot of overhangs in this model. We can also, just to demonstrate, only have support touching the build plate, and we'll see the difference in a second. And while it's slicing, this prime blob feature is optional, but if you're having problems with your consistent extrusion of your raft, you may want to enable it, just so that you do have something priming the extruder. And this as well, if you're having problems with extrusion, feel free to enable the prime tower and do that. So after this is sliced, I'm going to send a different print off to the printer, just with another print with support that'll print relatively fast, and then we'll come back and go through how to remove support from your part, which is fairly simple. It's taking quite a while to slice. So here you can see that we only have support touching the build plate, and once sort of the part arrives in an area, we no longer have support there. So you see you have these islands of support almost that will eventually come up and support the top of the part as best they can. Play around with support. You'll have to probably mess with the parameters a little when you're first starting out and printing with parts with support, but you'll eventually get a sense of what looks and works well and what doesn't. One thing to note is at the interface of this PLA and PVA, you can sometimes get some surface roughness, so just take into account where support is on your part when designing parts with critical features. Yeah, so we'll be back with a finished part, and we'll go through removing support from the part.